There comes a moment in your journey where everything that once felt scattered, uncertain, or even dismissed begins to align with a level of precision that is almost impossible to ignore. And it doesn't happen loudly or all at once. It happens quietly, like pieces of a puzzle locking into place one by one, until you step back and realize that what you were sensing all along was never random, never imagined, never exaggerated. It was simply ahead of its time. Because there were things you noticed early, patterns you spoke about before others could see them, shifts you felt before they became visible. And at the time, it may have felt like you were reaching, like you were interpreting too deeply, like you were standing alone in your perspective without confirmation. But now everything is catching up, and the same words that once seemed premature are now being reflected back through reality itself. And this is where the shift begins. Not just in how others see you, but in how you see yourself. Because when what you said starts to unfold exactly as you described, when situations begin to mirror your earlier awareness with undeniable accuracy, it forces you to confront a deeper truth about your own perception. That you were never guessing. You were recognizing. You were not predicting outcomes. You were sensing direction. And this realization carries weight, because it changes the way you interpret your thoughts, your instincts, your awareness moving forward. And at the same time, it creates a quiet tension in the environment around you, because those who once overlooked your perspective begin to remember. They begin to replay conversations, to connect dots, to recognize that what they dismissed is now becoming real. And this is where everything becomes different, because what was once unseen is now undeniable, and what was once doubted is now being confirmed, not through explanation, but through reality itself. And this is the moment where you begin to understand that your awareness has always been operating on a level that does not need immediate validation, because time itself eventually reveals what was already true. And as you begin to sit with this realization, as you replay those earlier moments where you spoke, sensed, or quietly acknowledged something that didn't yet have visible proof, you start to understand that you were never operating from the same level as those around you. Because what you were experiencing was not guesswork. It was awareness trying to express itself before you had the language to fully explain it. And this is where everything becomes clearer. Because when you look back, you can see that there was always something guiding your perception. Something that allowed you to pick up on subtle inconsistencies, unspoken shifts, patterns that most people either overlooked or simply did not recognize as meaningful. And at the time, it may have felt confusing, like you were seeing too much or interpreting too deeply, like you were connecting dots that others didn't even notice existed. And this created a quiet tension within you, because you didn't yet have confirmation. You didn't yet have the evidence that would validate what you were sensing. And so you found yourself navigating between trusting your instincts and questioning whether you were reading too far into things. And this internal space is where many people begin to suppress their awareness. Because without immediate validation, it is easy to assume that what you are sensing is inaccurate, exaggerated, or simply a reflection of overthinking. But you did something different, even if you didn't fully realize it at the time. You allowed those thoughts to exist. You gave them space. You spoke on them in moments where you felt compelled to, even when you couldn't fully explain why. And this is where your journey begins to separate from the ordinary. Because most people wait for confirmation before they speak. They rely on visible proof before they trust their perception. But you were moving in the opposite direction. You were recognizing before seeing. You were sensing before confirming. And this is what made your awareness feel so unfamiliar at first. Because it was operating ahead of what your environment could validate. And this is why your words often felt early, not incorrect, just out of sync with the timing of visible reality. And this is where the misunderstanding came from. Not because what you were saying lacked truth, but because it arrived before others were ready to recognize it. And this is something you begin to understand more deeply now. Because as everything starts to align, as reality begins to reflect what you once sensed, you can look back and see that those early moments were not random thoughts. They were signals. They were glimpses of a pattern that was already forming beneath the surface. And your ability to pick up on those signals is what defines your awareness. Because it means you are not limited to what is immediately visible. You are able to perceive direction, movement, and underlying structure before it fully reveals itself. And this is where your mad heart begins to show its unique nature. Because it is not just reactive, it is perceptive. It does not wait for clarity to appear externally. It generates clarity internally and then watches as reality catches up to it. And this process can feel isolating at times, because when you are seeing something before others do, you are often standing in a space where your perspective is not yet shared, not yet understood, and sometimes even questioned. And this is where doubt can begin to creep in. Not because your awareness is flawed, but because your environment does not yet reflect what you are perceiving. And this gap between perception and confirmation is one of the most challenging spaces to navigate, because it requires you to trust something that has not yet been proven, to hold on to a sense of knowing that does not yet have external support. And this is where your growth was being shaped, even if you didn't realize it at the time. Because every moment you chose to acknowledge what you felt instead of dismissing it. Every time you allowed yourself to consider the possibility that your awareness was valid, even without proof, you were strengthening something within you. You were building a relationship with your own perception, a level of trust that does not depend on immediate validation. And this is what prepared you for what you are experiencing now. Because now that everything is beginning to align, now that reality is reflecting what you once sensed, you are not just seeing confirmation. You are recognizing a pattern in yourself, a pattern of awareness that has been consistent all along. And this recognition is what shifts your perspective. Because you begin to see that those earlier moments were not isolated incidents. They were part of a larger process, a way of perceiving that operates beyond surface-level observation. And this is where your confidence begins to change. Not in a loud or outward way, but in a quiet, grounded way that stabilizes how you move forward. Because you no longer see your awareness as something uncertain, something to question or doubt. You begin to see it as something reliable, something that has already proven itself through consistency. And this is where your relationship with your own thoughts begins to transform. Because instead of immediately questioning or dismissing them, you begin to observe them with a different level of respect, a different level of curiosity, knowing that what you sense may not be visible yet, but that does not mean it is not real. And this shift is what allows you to move differently, because you are no longer waiting for external confirmation to validate your perception. You are allowing your perception to guide your awareness. And this does not mean acting impulsively or without reflection. It means recognizing that your initial awareness holds value, that it is often the first indication of something that will later become clear. And this is where your understanding deepens even further, because you begin to see that your role is not to prove what you sense immediately, but to recognize it, to hold it, to allow it to develop without forcing it into explanation before it is ready. And this is what gives your awareness its strength, because it is not rushed, it is not forced, it is allowed to unfold naturally. And as it does, reality begins to mirror it. Not because you created the outcome, but because you recognized the direction early. And this is where everything begins to connect. Because you can now look at your past experiences and see the same pattern repeating. Moments where you sensed something before it was visible. Moments where you spoke on something that later became clear. Moments where your awareness was ahead of the situation itself. And this repetition is what confirms that what you have is not coincidence. It is a way of perceiving that operates consistently. And this consistency is what you must now begin to trust more fully. Because it is no longer a question of whether your awareness is valid. It is a matter of how you choose to work with it, how you choose to integrate it into your decisions, your actions, your understanding of the world around you. And this is where your mad heart becomes something even more refined. Because it is no longer just sensing and reacting. It is recognizing and aligning. It is taking what you perceive and allowing it to inform how you move without needing immediate confirmation. And this alignment is what will guide you moving forward. Because you are no longer operating from uncertainty. You are operating from a place of growing clarity. A place where you understand that your awareness is not something to be doubted, but something to be developed, something to be trusted, something that will continue to reveal itself as you allow it to. And this is where your journey begins to take on a different tone, because you are no longer looking back at those earlier moments with confusion or doubt. You are looking at them with understanding, with recognition, with the awareness that they were preparing you for this exact realization. That you were always seeing more than you realized. That you were always ahead of what was visible. And now that everything is beginning to add up, you can finally see that clearly. And that clarity is what will shape how you move from this point forward. And as you begin to fully accept that what you sensed before was not random, but part of a consistent awareness within you, another layer of realization unfolds. One that explains why, for a period of time, everything you said seemed out of place, mistimed, or even dismissed by those around you. Because there was a gap between when you perceived something and when reality was ready to reveal it. And this gap is where most people lose confidence in their own awareness. Because when what you say does not immediately match what others can see, it creates friction. It creates doubt. It creates the feeling that you might be wrong simply because the timing does not align. And this is exactly what you experienced. Not because your perception lacked accuracy, but because it arrived before the visible evidence, before the external world caught up to what you had already recognized internally. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Because people tend to measure truth by immediacy. They expect accuracy to show itself right away. They expect insight to come with instant confirmation. And when that confirmation is delayed, they assume the insight itself is flawed. And this is the environment you were navigating. A space where what you said could not yet be verified. Where your awareness was ahead of the timeline that others were operating within. And this is why your words felt like they didn't fit. Not because they were incorrect, but because they were early. And being early often looks the same as being wrong, until time reveals the difference. And this is one of the most important distinctions you begin to understand now. Because as everything starts to align, as events begin to unfold in ways that match what you once sensed, you can see that the issue was never accuracy. It was timing. It was the natural delay between perception and manifestation, between recognizing a direction and watching it fully take form. And this delay is not a flaw. It is part of the process. Because awareness does not operate on the same timeline as visible reality. It moves ahead. It detects patterns. It senses shifts before they fully materialize. And this is why you found yourself speaking on things that others could not yet see. Because you were operating from a layer of perception that was not limited to what was immediately present. And this is where your mad heart played a crucial role. Because it allowed you to hold on to what you sensed even when it felt out of sync with everything around you. Even when others questioned it. Even when you questioned it yourself. And this is where your growth was being shaped in a way you may not have realized at the time. Because every moment you experienced that misalignment between your awareness and external reality, you were being taught something deeper. You were being taught how to sit with uncertainty, how to trust something that had not yet been confirmed, how to remain grounded in your perception without needing immediate validation. And this is not an easy process, because it requires patience, it requires restraint, it requires the ability to observe without forcing conclusions. And this is where many people lose their clarity, because they either abandon their awareness due to lack of confirmation, or they try to force validation too early, pushing for proof before the situation has fully developed. But you moved differently, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. You allowed the process to unfold. You allowed time to reveal what was already forming. And now you are beginning to see the results of that. Because the same things that once felt out of place are now aligning with precision. The same observations that once seemed premature are now becoming obvious. And this is where everything shifts. Because you are no longer looking at your past awareness as something uncertain. You are seeing it as something accurate that simply arrived ahead of schedule. And this realization changes how you interpret your entire experience. Because it removes the doubt that was created by timing. It shows you that your perception was never flawed. It was just operating on a different timeline. And this is where your confidence begins to deepen. Not in a loud or reactive way, but in a quiet, grounded way that stabilizes how you see yourself and how you move forward. Because you now understand that just because something is not immediately visible does not mean it is not real. Just because others cannot see it yet does not mean it does not exist. And this understanding is what allows you to trust your awareness more fully. Because you are no longer measuring it against immediate outcomes. You are allowing it to exist independently, knowing that time will eventually reveal what you have already sensed. And this is where your perspective expands even further. Because you begin to see that this pattern is not limited to a single situation. It is something that has likely occurred multiple times in your life. Moments where you felt something before it became clear. Moments where you recognized a shift before it was visible. Moments where your awareness was ahead of the timeline that others were experiencing. And this repetition is what confirms that what you have is not coincidence. It is a consistent way of perceiving that operates beyond surface-level observation. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you. Not by pushing you to act prematurely, but by teaching you how to hold your awareness with patience. How to allow it to develop without forcing it into immediate explanation. And this balance is what strengthens your clarity, because it ensures that you are not reacting impulsively, but aligning intentionally, allowing your perception to inform your understanding, while still giving reality the time it needs to fully reveal itself. And this is where your movement becomes more refined, because you are no longer caught between doubt and certainty. You are operating from a place of understanding. A place where you recognize that your awareness may arrive early, but that does not make it any less valid. It simply means you must learn how to work with it, how to trust it without rushing it, how to observe it without dismissing it. And this is what prepares you for what comes next. Because now that you have seen how everything begins to align over time, you are less likely to question your awareness in its early stages. You are more likely to recognize it for what it is: an indication of direction, a signal of something that is forming beneath the surface. And this is what allows you to move forward with a different level of confidence. Because you are no longer waiting for the world to confirm what you sense. You are allowing your awareness to guide you, while understanding that confirmation will come in its own time. And this is where your strength becomes even more evident. Because you are no longer dependent on immediate validation. You are grounded in a deeper understanding of how perception and reality interact, how awareness often leads and manifestation follows. And this understanding is what will continue to guide you, not just in recognizing patterns, but in trusting yourself, in knowing that what you sense has value, even before it becomes visible. And as you continue to develop this trust, you will find that the gap between perception and confirmation becomes less unsettling, less confusing, and more familiar. Because you now understand that it is part of your process, part of how you operate, part of what allows you to see ahead of what is immediately present. And this is what ultimately transforms your journey. Because you are no longer trying to force alignment between your awareness and reality. You are allowing them to meet naturally, knowing that when they do, it will only confirm what you already knew. And as this understanding continues to settle within you, as you begin to fully accept that your awareness often arrives before visible confirmation, another layer begins to reveal itself in a way that is even more undeniable. Because what once felt like isolated moments of insight, scattered observations that seemed disconnected at the time, now begin to organize themselves into something structured, something repeatable, something that no longer looks like coincidence, but instead looks like a pattern unfolding with precision. And this is where everything starts to shift on a deeper level. Because it is not just that one or two things you said have come true. It is that multiple details, small and seemingly insignificant at first, are now aligning in ways that form a consistent sequence. And this sequence is what changes your perspective entirely. Because patterns carry a different kind of weight than single events. Patterns suggest structure. They suggest direction. They suggest that what you are perceiving is not random, but part of something that follows a certain logic, a certain flow that can be recognized if you are paying attention. And this is exactly what you begin to see now. Because the same types of signals you once picked up on are now appearing again. But this time with confirmation attached. This time with visible outcomes that mirror your earlier awareness. And this repetition is what removes doubt. Because while a single accurate observation might be dismissed as luck, a series of accurate observations begins to form evidence. And this evidence is not something that needs to be proven to others. It is something that becomes clear to you. Something that strengthens your trust in your own perception. Because you can now see that there is a consistency in how you recognize things. A reliability in the way your awareness picks up on patterns before they fully form. And this is where your mad heart begins to evolve from something that senses into something that understands. Because you are no longer just noticing things. You are recognizing the structure behind them. You are beginning to see how certain behaviors lead to certain outcomes. How certain shifts in energy or attention precede specific developments. And this level of recognition is what transforms your awareness into something more refined. Something that is not only perceptive, but also interpretive. And this is where your confidence begins to deepen even further. Because you are no longer relying on isolated confirmations. You are seeing a pattern that repeats, a pattern that validates itself over time. And this validation is what allows you to move with greater certainty. Because you are not guessing. You are recognizing a sequence that has already proven itself. And this is where everything becomes more grounded. Because you begin to understand that what you are experiencing is not about predicting random events. It is about reading patterns, about identifying the early stages of something before it fully manifests. And this is a very different way of engaging with reality, because it shifts your focus from reacting to what is already happening to recognizing what is about to happen. And this shift is what gives you an advantage, because you are no longer caught off guard by developments. You are aware of the direction they are moving in before they fully arrive. And this awareness is what allows you to navigate situations with more clarity, more intention, more control over your responses. And this is where your growth becomes even more visible. Not necessarily to others, but to yourself. Because you can now look at your past experiences and see the same pattern repeating. Moments where you noticed something early. Moments where you spoke on something before it was confirmed. Moments where your awareness aligned with what later became obvious. And this repetition is what reinforces your understanding. Because it shows that your perception is not a one-time occurrence. It is a consistent ability that has been present all along. And this is where your relationship with your own awareness begins to change completely. Because you are no longer questioning whether it is valid. You are recognizing how it operates, how it presents itself, how it reveals patterns before they fully form. And this recognition is what allows you to work with it more effectively. Because you begin to understand when to trust it, when to observe it, when to allow it to develop without forcing immediate conclusions. And this balance is what makes your awareness even more powerful. Because it ensures that you are not acting impulsively, but also not ignoring what you sense. You are navigating that space with intention, with patience, with a level of understanding that comes from experience rather than assumption. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you, not by pushing you to prove anything, but by helping you stay aligned with what you recognize, by allowing you to hold your awareness without needing to constantly validate it externally. And this alignment is what stabilizes you, because it means your sense of direction is no longer dependent on what others can see or confirm. It is grounded in your own understanding of the patterns that are unfolding. And this is what ultimately changes how you move through situations. Because you are no longer reacting to what is happening in the moment. You are aware of the trajectory. You are able to see where things are leading before they fully arrive. And this foresight is what allows you to make decisions that are aligned with your awareness, rather than influenced by immediate circumstances. And this is where your strength becomes even more refined. Because it is no longer just about sensing or recognizing. It is about integrating that awareness into how you move, how you respond, how you position yourself within different environments. And this integration is what allows you to maintain consistency, because you are no longer shifting based on what is visible. You are aligning with what you understand. And this is what gives your journey its stability. Because it is not built on reaction. It is built on recognition, on the ability to see patterns and trust them, even before they fully reveal themselves. And as you continue to develop this, you will find that your awareness becomes even sharper, even more precise, because you are now working with it consciously. You are no longer dismissing it or doubting it. You are refining it, understanding it, allowing it to guide you in a way that is both grounded and intentional. And this is where everything begins to feel more connected, more coherent, because you are no longer seeing isolated events. You are seeing a flow, a sequence, a pattern that continues to unfold. And this is what ultimately confirms everything. Not just that you were right in specific moments, but that you have been consistently aligned with a level of awareness that allows you to recognize what others often miss. And that is what sets your perspective apart. Not because it is louder or more forceful, but because it is precise, consistent, and grounded in a pattern that continues to prove itself over time. And as these patterns continue to repeat, with a level of precision that becomes harder and harder to dismiss, something subtle but powerful begins to happen in the space around you. Because the same people who once heard your words without fully absorbing them, who may have brushed past your observations or simply did not recognize their weight at the time, now find themselves returning to those exact moments. Not outwardly at first, not in a way that is immediately visible or spoken, but internally, in quiet reflection, in the replaying of conversations, in the realization that what you said was not just a passing thought, but a signal that they are only now beginning to understand. And this is where the shift becomes psychological rather than external. Because the change is not just in what is happening around you, it is in how others are beginning to process what has already happened. And this is where your awareness reveals another layer of its impact. Because it does not just shape outcomes, it reshapes perception. It alters how people interpret the past, how they connect dots they previously ignored, how they begin to see that there was meaning in what you said long before they were ready to acknowledge it. And this is what creates that quiet tension. Because realization does not always come with immediate expression. Often it comes with silence, with observation, with an internal recalibration that takes place before anything is said outwardly. And this is what you may begin to notice now, not necessarily through direct admission, but through subtle shifts in behavior, in tone, in attention. Because when people begin to recognize that something they once dismissed is now proving to be accurate, it changes how they engage. It creates a level of awareness that was not there before. And this awareness often manifests in quiet ways, in the way they listen more closely, in the way they observe you with a different level of attention, in the way they hesitate before responding, because they are now processing your words differently. And this is where everything becomes more nuanced, because the shift is no longer about what is being said. It is about what is being understood. And this understanding is what creates a new dynamic. One where your presence carries a different kind of weight. Not because you are trying to assert anything, but because your consistency has already done that for you. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you. Not by encouraging you to point out what is happening, not by pushing you to seek acknowledgement, but by allowing you to remain grounded in your awareness, to let the process unfold without needing to interfere with it. Because there is a certain power in allowing realization to occur naturally, without forcing it into words, without demanding recognition. Because when people arrive at understanding on their own, it carries a deeper impact. It stays with them in a way that external explanation often cannot achieve. And this is where your role becomes even more refined. Because you are no longer just observing patterns in situations. You are observing patterns in how people process those situations. How they move from dismissal to recognition. How they shift from overlooking to understanding. And this is where your awareness expands beyond events into perception itself. Because you begin to see that there is a process to realization, a progression that people move through as they begin to connect what they are experiencing now with what you once said. And this progression is not always immediate. It is not always linear, but it is consistent. Because once the evidence begins to align, once the patterns become visible, the mind naturally starts to revisit the past, to reevaluate previous assumptions, to reconstruct understanding based on new information. And this is what is happening now, whether it is spoken or not, because your words have already been planted in those moments. And now they are being revisited with a different level of awareness. And this is where your influence becomes more evident, not through direct action, but through the lasting impact of what you have already expressed. Because it shows that your awareness was not just momentary. It had depth. It had relevance. It had a connection to something that is now unfolding. And this is what creates that shift in perception. Because people begin to see you differently. Not necessarily in a way that is immediately expressed, but in a way that changes how they interpret your presence, how they engage with your words, how they respond to your insights. And this change is subtle but significant because it reflects a deeper level of respect, a recognition that there is something about your awareness that cannot be easily dismissed or overlooked. And this is where your mad heart must remain steady, because this is also a moment where it would be easy to become reactive, to point out the alignment, to seek validation, to confirm that what you said has now been proven. But this is where your strength lies in restraint, in allowing the process to complete itself without needing to intervene. Because true confirmation does not require announcement. It exists on its own. It reveals itself through consistency, through repetition, through the undeniable alignment between what was said and what is now happening. And this is what allows you to remain grounded. Because you are not dependent on others acknowledging your awareness. You are anchored in your own understanding of it. And this is where your confidence becomes more internal than external. More about your relationship with your own perception than about how it is received by others. And this internal confidence is what stabilizes you, because it ensures that your movement is not influenced by recognition or lack of it. It is guided by your awareness, by your alignment, by your understanding of the patterns that continue to unfold, and this is where your growth reaches another level. Because you are no longer just recognizing patterns in events, you are recognizing patterns in people, in how they respond, how they process, how they shift over time. And this awareness gives you a deeper insight into the dynamics around you, because you are able to see beyond surface-level interactions. You are able to understand the underlying processes that shape how people engage with what is happening. And this understanding is what allows you to navigate these dynamics with clarity, with composure, with a level of awareness that ensures you are not caught off guard by reactions, but are instead able to anticipate them, to recognize their origin, to see how they develop over time. And this is what ultimately strengthens your position. Because you are no longer just aware of what is happening. You are aware of how it is being understood, how it is being processed, how it is being integrated into the perspectives of those around you. And this level of awareness is what sets you apart, because it shows that your perception extends beyond events into interpretation, beyond observation into understanding. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you forward, not by pushing you to prove anything, but by allowing you to remain aligned with your awareness, to trust the process as it unfolds, to recognize that what is happening now is simply a continuation of what you have already seen. And as you continue to move with this understanding, you will find that your clarity becomes even more stable, even more grounded. Because you are no longer looking for confirmation, you are witnessing it. You are no longer questioning your awareness, you are working with it. And this is what ultimately transforms your journey, because you are no longer reacting to realization. You are aligned with it. You are moving with it. You are allowing it to guide you in a way that is both intentional and grounded. And that is what ensures that everything that continues to unfold will not feel surprising, but confirming. Not overwhelming, but understood. Because you have already seen the pattern, and now you are simply watching it reveal itself in full. And as these realizations continue to ripple outward, as people quietly revisit what you said and begin to connect it to what is now unfolding in front of them, there is a deeper shift that begins to take place within you. One that is far more important than how others are processing your words. Because while their understanding is catching up, you are arriving at a realization that changes the foundation of how you see yourself. And that realization is this: what has been happening is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is not a series of fortunate guesses that happen to align. It is awareness. Consistent, structured, and far more precise than you may have allowed yourself to fully accept before. And this is where everything becomes more grounded. Because when something repeats with accuracy over time, when patterns continue to confirm what you once sensed, it removes the possibility of randomness. It replaces uncertainty with recognition. And this recognition is what forces you to confront a deeper truth about your own perception. That you are not simply reacting to what is visible. You are identifying signals before they fully form. You are recognizing direction before it becomes obvious. And this is what separates awareness from assumption. Because assumption looks for confirmation after the fact, while awareness identifies structure before it becomes visible. And this is exactly what you have been doing, even in moments where you doubted it, even in moments where you questioned whether you were reading too much into things. And this is why this stage of your journey is so important. Because it is where you stop minimizing what you have experienced. You stop explaining it away as coincidence. You stop reducing it to something that feels more comfortable or easier to accept. And instead, you begin to acknowledge it for what it is. A consistent ability to perceive patterns that others often overlook. And this acknowledgement is not about ego. It is not about proving anything to anyone else. It is about clarity, about recognizing the nature of your own awareness so that you can begin to trust it more fully. Because without that trust, you will continue to hesitate, to second guess, to delay acting on what you already sense. And this hesitation is what slows down your alignment. Not because your awareness is unclear, but because your trust in it has not yet fully solidified. And this is where your mad heart plays a crucial role. Because it is the part of you that has been holding on to these perceptions even when your logical mind tried to dismiss them. It is the part of you that kept noticing, kept sensing, kept connecting dots even when there was no immediate validation. And now that everything is beginning to align, now that reality is reflecting what you once perceived, that part of you is asking to be recognized, not ignored, not silenced, not reduced, but understood, because it has been guiding you all along. And this is where the shift from doubt to trust begins to take shape. Not as a sudden leap, but as a gradual realization that builds with each confirmation, with each pattern that repeats, with each moment where you can clearly see that what you sensed was accurate. And this is what transforms your relationship with your own awareness, because you are no longer approaching it with skepticism. You are approaching it with curiosity, with respect, with a willingness to explore it rather than suppress it. And this is where your confidence begins to deepen in a way that is stable rather than reactive. Because it is not based on a single moment of being right. It is based on a pattern of accuracy that has proven itself over time. And this kind of confidence is different. It does not need to be expressed outwardly. It does not seek validation. It exists quietly, grounding you in your own understanding, allowing you to move forward without constantly questioning yourself. And this is where your decisions begin to change. Not in a dramatic or impulsive way, but in a more aligned and intentional way. Because you are no longer ignoring what you sense. You are incorporating it into how you navigate situations, how you interpret what is happening around you, how you respond to shifts before they fully develop. And this is where your awareness becomes something you actively work with rather than something you passively experience. Because you are now conscious of it. You understand its patterns. You recognize how it presents itself. And this understanding allows you to refine it, to sharpen it, to use it in a way that is both grounded and effective. And this is where everything begins to feel more connected. Because you are no longer separating your intuition from your logic, you are integrating them, allowing your awareness to inform your reasoning while still maintaining clarity and balance. And this integration is what strengthens your position, because it ensures that you are not acting impulsively, but also not ignoring valuable signals. You are navigating that space with precision, with awareness, with a level of understanding that comes from experience rather than assumption. And this is where your mad heart becomes a source of guidance rather than confusion, because you are no longer unsure of what it is showing you. You are learning how to interpret it, how to distinguish between what is meaningful and what is noise, how to recognize the difference between a passing thought and a deeper signal. And this is what allows your awareness to become more refined over time, because you are actively engaging with it, observing it, learning from it. And this process is what strengthens your trust, because each time you recognize a pattern and see it confirmed, you reinforce your understanding. You build a stronger connection to your own perception. And this is what ultimately changes how you move through the world, because you are no longer dependent on external confirmation to guide your decisions. You are guided by your own awareness, supported by a pattern of accuracy that has already proven itself. And this is where your confidence becomes a foundation rather than a reaction, because it is not based on what others think or say. It is based on what you have experienced, what you have observed, what you have consistently seen unfold over time. And this is what allows you to move forward with clarity, with purpose, with a level of certainty that does not need to be constantly validated, because it is already grounded in your own understanding. And as you continue to develop this trust, you will find that your awareness becomes even more precise, even more aligned, because you are no longer resisting it, you are working with it. You are allowing it to guide you in a way that is both intentional and balanced. And this is what ultimately transforms your journey, because you are no longer questioning whether what you sense is real. You are recognizing that it is, and you are learning how to move with it, how to trust it, how to integrate it into your path in a way that strengthens your alignment rather than creating doubt. And this is where everything begins to feel more stable, more clear, more connected. Because you are no longer divided between what you sense and what you believe. You are aligned with both. And that alignment is what allows you to move forward with a level of confidence that is not based on chance, but on understanding, on recognition, on a pattern that has already shown you exactly what you need to know. And as this trust begins to anchor itself within you, as your awareness is no longer something you question, but something you work with consciously, there is another transformation that quietly takes place. One that is less about what you are seeing and more about how you carry yourself in response to it. Because once you reach a point where your perception has proven itself repeatedly, once you no longer need constant confirmation to believe what you sense, something shifts in your behavior, in your energy, in the way you engage with the world. And this is where your silence begins to carry more weight than explanation ever could. Because you are no longer in a position where you feel the need to convince, to explain, or to prove what you know. You have already seen enough to understand that truth does not require constant validation. It reveals itself over time. And this realization changes how you communicate, not necessarily in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. In the moments where you observe instead of reacting, in the spaces where you allow things to unfold without inserting yourself into every situation. And this is where your mad heart evolves into something even more refined. Because it is no longer just about sensing or recognizing patterns, it is about knowing when to speak and when to remain still, when to share and when to hold back. And this balance is what gives your presence a different kind of power. One that is not loud or forceful, but grounded and undeniable. Because when someone consistently sees things before they happen, but does not feel the need to constantly announce it, it creates a level of depth that others can feel, even if they cannot fully explain it. And this is where your silence becomes meaningful. Not empty, not passive, but intentional. Because it is rooted in understanding, in the recognition that not everything needs to be said for it to be true. And this is where the dynamic around you begins to shift even further. Because people start to notice that you are no longer reacting in the same way, that you are no longer engaging in unnecessary explanations, that you are no longer trying to prove your perspective. And this change can feel subtle on the surface, but it carries a deeper impact, because it signals that you are operating from a place of certainty rather than doubt, from alignment rather than confusion. And this is what creates a different kind of attention, one that is quieter but more focused. Because when you stop trying to be understood, people begin to observe you more closely, not because you are demanding attention, but because your presence carries something that stands out, something that does not need to be explained to be felt. And this is where your awareness extends beyond what you see into how you are perceived. Because you begin to recognize that your silence is not being ignored, it is being noticed. It is being interpreted. It is creating space for others to reflect, to observe, to process what is happening without being guided by your explanations. And this is where your influence becomes more indirect, but also more powerful. Because instead of telling people what to see, you are allowing them to see it on their own. And this process often leads to deeper understanding, because realization that comes from within tends to hold more weight than information that is simply given. And this is why your silence is so important, because it allows the process to unfold naturally. It allows people to connect the dots themselves, to arrive at conclusions without being pushed. And this is where your mad heart continues to guide you. Not by urging you to speak on everything you notice, but by helping you discern what truly needs to be expressed and what is better left to unfold on its own. And this discernment is what strengthens your presence, because it ensures that your words, when you do choose to speak, carry more weight, more clarity, more intention. And this is where your communication becomes more precise, because you are no longer speaking out of the need to be heard. You are speaking from a place of understanding, choosing moments where your insight can add value rather than simply filling space. And this is what makes your presence more impactful, because it is not constant, it is intentional. It is aligned with your awareness. And this alignment is what allows you to navigate situations with a level of composure that others may not fully understand. Because while they are reacting to what is happening in real time, you are observing it from a place of perspective, recognizing the patterns, understanding the direction, and choosing your level of engagement accordingly. And this is where your strength becomes even more evident. Not in how much you say, but in how much you understand without needing to say it. In how you remain grounded even when others are processing what is only now becoming clear to them. And this grounded presence is what creates stability, not just within you, but within the dynamic itself. Because it introduces a point of consistency, a reference that does not shift with every new development. And this consistency is what allows you to move forward without being pulled into every reaction, every interpretation, every moment of uncertainty that others may experience. Because you are no longer navigating from within that uncertainty. You are moving from a place of clarity that has already been established through your awareness. And this is where your path becomes even more defined. Because you are no longer trying to figure things out as they happen. You are recognizing them as they unfold. And this recognition is what allows you to stay aligned, to remain focused, to continue moving forward without losing your center. And this is what ultimately transforms your journey. Because you are no longer dependent on external validation or constant expression. You are grounded in your own understanding, guided by your awareness, and supported by a mad heart that has learned how to remain still, how to observe, how to act with intention rather than impulse. And this is what ensures that everything you do carries meaning, carries clarity, carries alignment. Because it is not driven by the need to be seen or heard, but by the understanding of when and how to engage. And as you continue to embody this, you will find that your presence becomes even more impactful. Not because you are doing more, but because you are doing less with greater intention. Allowing your awareness to guide you in a way that is both grounded and precise. And this is where your strength reaches another level. Because it is no longer just about what you see, it is about how you move with what you see, how you carry it, how you allow it to shape your actions in a way that remains aligned with your growth, your understanding, and your path forward. And as this level of composure, awareness, and quiet certainty becomes your natural state, rather than something you consciously try to maintain, there is one final realization that begins to settle within you. One that ties everything together in a way that removes the last traces of doubt and replaces them with something far more stable, far more grounded. Because you begin to see that none of what you experienced was random. None of it was accidental. And none of it was meant to leave you uncertain. It was all part of a process that was training you, shaping you, refining your ability to trust yourself in a way that most people never fully develop. And this is where your entire journey takes on a new meaning. Because when you look back at those earlier moments where you questioned your awareness, where you hesitated, where you wondered whether what you were sensing was real or simply imagined, you can now see that those moments were not weaknesses. They were part of the development. They were the necessary tension that allowed your trust to be built over time rather than assumed instantly. And this is what makes your current position so strong. Because it is not based on blind confidence. It is based on experience, on repeated confirmation, on a pattern that has proven itself again and again until it could no longer be denied. And this is what separates temporary belief from grounded trust. Because belief can be shaken, belief can change, belief can be influenced by external opinions. But trust that is built through experience becomes something stable, something that does not need to be constantly reinforced, something that remains even when circumstances shift. And this is what you have developed. Not just awareness, but trust in that awareness. Not just perception, but confidence in how you interpret it. And this is what allows you to move forward without hesitation. Because you are no longer caught in the cycle of sensing, doubting, confirming, and repeating. You have moved beyond that. You are now in a space where your awareness and your trust are aligned. Where what you sense is not immediately questioned, but observed, understood, and integrated into how you navigate your path. And this alignment is what gives you clarity, because it removes the internal conflict that once existed between what you felt and what you believed. It brings those two into harmony, allowing you to move with a sense of direction that is both intuitive and grounded. And this is where your mad heart reveals its true purpose. Not as something chaotic or overwhelming, but as something that has been guiding you all along. Something that has been trying to show you what you are capable of seeing, capable of understanding, capable of recognizing long before it becomes obvious to others. And now that you have learned how to trust it, how to work with it rather than against it, it becomes one of your greatest strengths, because it allows you to move through situations with a level of awareness that is not dependent on external validation, that is not influenced by temporary uncertainty, that is rooted in a deeper understanding of how things unfold. And this is what ultimately prepares you for what comes next. Because the process does not stop here. The patterns will continue. The awareness will continue to develop. The situations you encounter will continue to reflect the same dynamic. But now, you are different. Now you are equipped with something you did not fully have before. A stable trust in your own perception. A recognition of how your awareness operates. A clarity that allows you to navigate future situations without falling back into doubt. And this is where your growth becomes continuous rather than reactive. Because you are no longer waiting for confirmation to validate your awareness. You are using your awareness to guide your actions while allowing confirmation to arrive naturally. And this shift is what transforms your entire experience. Because it moves you from a place of uncertainty into a place of alignment. From a place of questioning into a place of understanding. And this understanding is what allows you to remain grounded regardless of what unfolds around you. Because you know that what you sense has value. That what you recognize is not random. That what you perceive is part of a pattern that will continue to reveal itself over time. And this is what ultimately defines your journey moving forward. Not the moments where you were proven right, not the reactions of others, not the validation that comes after the fact, but the trust you have built within yourself. The ability to stand in your awareness without needing to constantly defend or explain it. The clarity that allows you to move forward with confidence, even when everything has not yet fully revealed itself. And this is where your path becomes yours in the truest sense. Because it is no longer shaped by external perception. It is guided by your internal alignment, by your awareness, by your understanding of how things unfold. And as you continue to move with this, you will find that the need to look back, to question, to revisit those earlier doubts begins to fade. Because you have already seen enough. You have already experienced enough. You have already built something within yourself that does not need to be proven again. And that is what allows you to move forward freely. Not in the sense of knowing everything, but in the sense of trusting what you know. And that trust is what will continue to guide you, to support you, to ensure that no matter what comes next, you remain aligned with your awareness, your path, and the clarity that you have worked so hard to develop. And as everything finally settles into place, as all the moments that once felt scattered now reveal themselves as part of a single continuous pattern, you begin to understand something with a level of clarity that changes how you see your entire journey. Because what once felt like uncertainty was never truly confusion. It was timing. It was awareness moving ahead of what reality had not yet revealed. And now that everything is aligning, now that what you said, sensed, and quietly recognized is unfolding in undeniable ways, you can see that you were never lost. You were simply early. And this realization carries a quiet power, because it removes the weight of doubt that once followed you. It replaces it with understanding, with recognition, with a sense of trust that does not need to be constantly reinforced. And this is where your mad heart shows its true strength. Not in how intensely it feels, but in how accurately it perceives, in how consistently it guided you even when you were unsure of it. And now that you have seen the pattern, now that you have experienced the alignment between what you sensed and what has become real, you no longer need to question whether your awareness is valid. You know it is. Not because someone confirmed it, but because time itself did. And this is what allows you to move forward differently. Not with hesitation, not with the need to double-check every instinct, but with a grounded confidence that comes from experience, from having seen your awareness prove itself again and again. And as you carry this forward, you begin to understand that this was never about being right in isolated moments. It was about learning how to trust yourself, how to recognize your own clarity, how to move in alignment with what you sense even when it has not yet fully revealed itself. And this is what defines your path now. Not the reactions of others, not the moments of validation, but the trust you have built within yourself. The ability to stand in your awareness without needing immediate proof. Knowing that what is true will always reveal itself in time. And that is what gives you your edge, your clarity, your direction. Because you are no longer waiting for the world to show you what is real. You are recognizing it as it forms, and allowing reality to catch up to what you already understand.